Hey, Seagulf here. Today what I'm going to tie for you is bunny bugger. This is a great pattern. I got it off a site a long time ago. I think it was Home Fishing with Flies. I'm not sure if that site is still up and active. It's been a long time since I've gone there. But essentially what this tie is very simple, no wire, just minimal materials, and it catches fish. River system I've fished, caught 20-inch trout, and not 4 or 5 casts later nailed a 17-inch smallmouth with the same fly. It just flat out catches fish. I don't know what it looks like, but it just works great. Now the materials used, the body, you use Hair Zero Plus dubbing. For the tail, off the rabbit strip, I cut off just a bunch of fur to tie in the tail. I use 4X streamer hook, size 6, but you can really vary it depending on the water system. You can either go to a 3X or you can go to a bigger, smaller size. It just depends on the water you're fishing, and you want to size your hook to the water. And of course, with your wire, you'll want to do the same. You don't want to use, what I use with the size 6 is a .030. If you go like a smaller size hook, you'll want to go to a smaller size wire like an 025 or even an 010. And then the hackle I use is just some generic grizzly hackle I got, wet fly grizzly. Just got it in a grab bag, and it's worked really well for me. Starting to run out, so I'll have to find some more soon. Alright, let me zoom in on the vise. There we go. Alright, get the hook in the vise. Now what I always want to start out with is I do 6 or 7 wraps of wire. So just break the wire off. And then what I do is I center the wire on the hook shank, and then I start the thread. Trim off the tag end. Alright, so now with the wire, now since it's going to be heavily dubbed, you don't need to worry about coating it with thread. So basically what I want to do is just get the wire locked in so it doesn't move, and just put maybe a couple wraps around it. So now the wire is locked in. Now just take the thread to the back of the hook. Now I take my rabbit strip, and I'll cut off a healthy chunk of hair here. That should give me a pretty substantial tail. Now, since I tie kind of clockwise when I tie, what you always want to do is, since I wrap away from me, what I want to do is lay the tail material back over the hook shank so the end of it is towards me that I want to tie in. And the reason I do that is that helps to lay the material on the top of the hook better. I found if I were to lay it that way, it would wrap under the hook shank, and then you get it wouldn't tie properly. But this way, I feel I can control the tailing material a lot better, and it's tied right on top of the hook. So now, what I want to do is use a half hitch just to lock that all into place. As you can see, I have a very loose bobbin. I need to tighten it up. Alright, so now what I want to do is tie in the hackle. Now, since what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie the hackle this way, what I want to do is, you always want the shiny side forward and the dull side to the back. So since I'm going to tie it this way, what you want to do is pull the bottom half of the hackle off. And what that does is that allows you to, when you wrap the hackle, it gives you a much cleaner wrap, and it's much easier to control the hackle. So, same thing as the tail. I want to lay the hackle across like that. And again, I'll do another half hitch. When you're tying, you can never do enough half hitches. It saves you a lot of time if you accidentally break off the thread. When you've done a half hitch, it's really easy. You can just restart your thread and you're good to go, and your fly will be just fine. It won't fall apart on you. So now I use the dubbing. And this, I don't worry about doing like a tack dubbing. I just wrap it really tight on there. Just do a good rope kind of a. You don't have to worry about the dubbing giving you the buggy look, because you get a little bit of a dubbing body, but the dubbing isn't what gives the fly its body. It's the hackle that works when you're actually fishing this fly. The hackle does all the work for you. And actually, while I'm wrapping the dubbing, the best way that I've seen that this fly work is pretty much every way. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to. I've fished it upstream. I've fished it downstream. I've done like a swing cast where you cast it out across and then you let it swing back across and let the current let it swing, and it pretty much works any which way you throw it. It really depends on the water, on how the fish are positioning, whether they're feeding, actively feeding, whether they're kind of sitting in a hold, and if something big comes by, they'll grab it. Otherwise, they're just resting just out of the current. Like say under a boulder, behind a boulder where they got a current break, and they're not actively feeding per se, but if something big comes by, they'll definitely chop it. But I've also seen, especially with smallmouth, they will get out in some gnarly current when they're hungry or just active, and apparently they have limitless energy because they just seem not to care. Alright, that should be enough to get me to the front. And what I do is, on the back, when I had tied in the tail, that material kind of almost went up to the wire, giving you a pretty consistent body. Now as I'm tying in front of the wire, I'm kind of doubling up the dubbing just to give the fly a consistent shape. And looks like I need just a little more. That just gives it a pretty consistent thickness all the way down the shank of the hook. And as for colors go, I've tied this thing in pink, purple, chartreuse, you name it, I've tried it. And everything comes back to this olive, or I'll show you in a second here. Alright, so then of course, once you get to the front, what you want to do is do your half hitch, and then just let your bobbin hang. Another great color I've done, and this is for the tail and the body, is a rusty orange. So of probably 90% of the fish I've caught with this fly have been on the olive and the rusty orange color. Just both are great colors. But don't be afraid to try any other colors, because your system may have different prey than mine. So again, now I wrap it forward. And a trick with the hackle is you always want the hackle to be 90 degrees to the hook. And the reason you want that is when it's swimming, when you're tying it, sometimes when you wrap it, it'll want to curl back. Well, that doesn't do you any good on the water because when it catches the water, it won't move. So really what you want the hackle to be is at a 90-degree angle to the hook. So then when you're fishing it, it'll expand and contract with the water, and it'll give a lot of motion and a lot of body to the fly. So always make sure as you're rotating it to be careful to keep it as close as possible to a 90-degree angle to the hook, which means you might have to twist the hackle stem as you bring it forward. And if you notice, I started with the smallest part of the hackle and back, so as I wrap it forward, the shorter hackle is in the back and it gets longer as it comes forward. Bring it forward here. Alright. So now what I want to do is wrap it in. Now you want to keep tension as you're doing this. So then I do want to tie this in with a half hitch to trim it well. But what I'll do is I'll just trim off the longer bit here. It's not trimmed up properly, but what I want to do now is get that half hitch. Alright, so now it's locked in. The reason it's important to do that is I've done it, but it's not recommended. If you try to keep tension on it with your bobbin and then try to trim this, if you lose tension on the bobbin without the half hitch, it's possible you could lose your hackle and it would unwind, and then you got to re-wrap it. So by just trimming it off there, doing a half hitch, that holds everything in place. And then what I'm doing is I'm pushing the thread out of the way when I trim this. I think we've all been there where you've been trying to trim hackle or trim something off of a fly. And I got two little hackles here facing forward. Again, I'll push it out. And then you've accidentally cut the thread, and then you gotta potentially start over. Alright, so now got it to the point where I'm going to do my whip finish. And I'll do 2 of these. One. And there is the second. Now I cut the tag on. And now it's up to you. Now I don't use, a lot of times I've stopped using glue on the fly to hold the knot, usually to what finishes hold it, and I can't say I've ever had one come untied or even lost a hackle. I generally will lose the fly before it gets trashed. But one thing I have found is Sally Hansen Hard as Nails works great. Comes in a ton of wacky colors, so you can get pretty much everything under the sun depending on what you're tying. So here I've got a green. If I wanted to, I could touch it off. Then I've tied these with orange thread, so I've had them with a orange head. I really don't think it makes any difference. I think what catches the fish for you is the action. One last tip, so after you tie it, sometimes the hackle will stick together, so you can take your whip finisher and just kind of brush it, and what that'll do is that will release the fibers so that they come apart for the most part. And there you go. Zoom out here. Really nice bunny bugger, ready to go catch some fish. Tight lines, everyone, and hope you give it a try.